Hi, welcome to another Coffee HEMA video with me, Jamie McKeever. I wanted to today talk about getting the most out of sparring. I've touched upon this a lot, I think, in a few videos recently and way back when as well. But I really wanted to bring together some thoughts on this one because it keeps coming up. And short version of this is that I get the distinct impression that most people are relatively unthinking in their sparring. I don't mean that they're dumb or brutish or whatever. What I mean is they don't have any particular objective. And, it's quite common, I think, for having a 2-hour class. You've got an hour and a half class and half an hour sparring, and you've got to get all your kit on. So what happens is you finish the class, you rush to throw your stuff on, you got maybe 2 sparring matches in, and you just want to have fun. You go in and you do it, and, you do whatever you want. Pull out your greatest hits or whatever it happens to be. And, it's fun. And sometimes the best thing to do with sparring is to just, go with it and see what happens. But if that's the only kind of sparring you do, if you just kind of go into it and doing your strengths or you're doing whatever comes up without any kind of proactive thought about what you're trying to do or what your objectives are, I think you're really missing something from sparring. And the reason I say that is that sparring is great in that it is free form, right? And that nothing's scripted, nothing's structured. So whatever happens, you've got to make happen, right? Like no one's letting you doing anything, except in some circumstances. But it's also near zero consequences. Outside of you sparring dangerously and getting injured, doesn't matter if you got hit, right? You got hit. Like you'll mentally beat yourself up. You do this and that. But what that means is, it is a great time for you to get experimental, right? And this is what I mean when I say getting the most out of sparring. So it is much better, in my opinion, to have an objective for your sparring, right? To something that you particularly want to work on, right? So the bare minimum when you go into some free sparring is to have some objective you want to try. That objective could be this thing I'm really good at. I want to really, really get really good at it. I want to dig down on that one. More often for me, it's something like, okay, this thing I'm not very good at. I want to try that out. Or today I really want to focus on grappling. I haven't done that in a while. I want to try and get a lot of grapples in, right? So you're trying to set something up specifically, right? That is in some ways much better because you're going to be having a tactical plan that you now need to enable. And when you get it wrong, so what? You try again. You try something else. That didn't work, right? And you've got to be actively problem solving to make this work. It's like, that didn't work. Why didn't it work? Okay, I won't do it that way this time. I'll try it this way next time, right? It could be a specific technique. The problem with being too technique focused is that the situation where that technique is appropriate might not come up, right? So I tend to have much broader than I want to pull off this one particular thrust, but it might be I want to focus on thrusts, right? Or I want to focus on doing single tempo counters instead of 2 tempo counters or something like that, right? Much more kind of broad than a specific one play or whatever it happens to be. But there's also adaptive aspects that you should be doing in sparring, right? And again, this is a big tournament sparring distinction. If I am fencing someone in a tournament and I see them really good at something, I'll then avoid that. And if I'm seeing something's really good at something in sparring, I will try and set that up and try things to essentially defeat it, right? And that means that I'm learning how to counter something that someone's best at. It means that I'm spotting what they're best at, so that in a different situation I can make a different tactical plan to that. And again, every time they succeed, doesn't matter. I can try something else. Until I find something that does work against it, right? The flip side of setting up the things that they're good at is that I also wouldn't overly exploit something they're bad at, right? In sparring, if I've done something and it's worked 2 or 3 times, I might do it a 4th or a 5th time to see whether they've adapted. And if they still haven't adapted and they're not changing what they're doing, and it's happening every time, I'll move on, right? There's no point spamming a hand hit, right? Which is what it commonly is. They're not learning anything, you're not learning anything, it's no longer interesting. Move on. That's no longer something that I'm going to be gaming in this particular sparring match, and I'll tell them about it afterwards if they want feedback. But there's no more point in trying to exploit it. And again, in a tournament, the opposite will happen. I'll keep doing it until the cows come home. It can also be a fun time to try something just completely new that you've never trained before, right? Especially if you see your opponent doing something, copy them, see what happens, give it a shot. You help, especially if it's something that they're doing well, and you try and replicate it, what's happening then is that you're now exploring the things that they're doing, and again recognizing what it feels like, why it's useful, why it can be applied. And you have a chat about it with them afterwards, right, and kind of work through there. Likewise, particularly if you've got this is something I do more when there's a big skill disparity between me and the person I'm sparring with. Like, they're much newer than me. Normally when we're fencing, we try and get to a good position and we do something from there. One thing I like to do when there's a big skill disparity is get to a terrible position. That does a couple of things. First of all, it's helping them recognize when I'm in a bad position and when they can succeed. It also helps me train skills that I need when I'm on the back foot, right? When I've found myself in a terrible position because my opponent has forced me to be there rather than because I've chosen to be there, right? Obviously then when I move into against a skilled opponent forcing me in a bad spot, then it is different because I need to recognize it and they're probably going to be faster. But this could be things like being closer than you think you really should be, or being in a guard that you think is not great against the guard choice that they've got, so you need to try different tricks. Or setting things up, in a way that is not particularly the best spot that you want to be in. Fundamentally, what I want to get at with all of this, right, is the main thing to get something out of sparring is to remember that it's not about winning in sparring. Yes, it's about not getting hit. Yes, it's about hitting. Yes, you still want to be doing things that are kind of good swordsmanship, right, or whatever. But it's more about experimenting and trying to find what that is, playing with new things you've never done before, playing with slightly different ways of doing it. Like, does it matter if I step or not step, right? What distance is too far? What distance is too close for this thing that I want to be good at? Trying all these variations about something as well as trying a new thing is also equally important. Can I get grappling to work? How can I get, especially, actually, this is a great one. Like, if they're really good at running away, it's a great time to think about how to get to grappling safely, right? You're playing on hard mode. And the point is that the difficulty sliders here, where it's harder or easier for you, mean that you're learning. And that's what you're trying to do here. You're trying to learn something from sparring. And have fun, right? And have fun. Let's not forget that. And all these skills that you're doing for that, these will then transform to things that are beneficial. If you're doing it in a tournament, if you're doing it in a real fight, TM, whatever that is, you're doing it in training, because you're going to broaden your understanding of these things and how they're applied, as well as sort of what they are. What are the essential things, right? Is it essential when I'm doing, I don't know, pick a random German word, a Krumpau, is it essential to use the edge that it says in the book? Is it essential to use the stepping pattern that it says in the book? Like, what happens differently if I tweak it slightly? And I would recommend everybody in free sparring, not necessarily all of the time, but a lot of the time, to start thinking about the experimental version of what they should be doing rather than just going and thinking about it. Pick an objective, or pick different ways of trying to apply your favorite technique. Pick something you're bad at, do something that is stupid and see whether you can recover from it. Any of these things, right? Because when you get hit, unless you're fencing someone who's a dick and has injured you, doesn't matter, right? You know it's because you were trying something new at least, and that's a good thing. You've learned something from that being hit. Whereas in a tournament you've lost points and maybe you lost a match, so that's not the time to experiment. Thanks for watching.